Now, on with the webinar. So, it's been a long time overdue, but I'm very excited to have you on, Gerard, because you are our first guest from Coventry on the webinar series. And if you guys don't know, I'm based. I live in Coventry myself, so I don't know why I just didn't invite you over for a cup of tea, and we could have done this from my sofa, Gerard. But yeah, you wouldn't want to come to the rough part of Coventry that I'm in. So, but it's great to have you on, mate. We've been networking, we've been in each other's spaces quite a lot over the last 2 years. And your story is something that I really wanted to bring to our members and share with us because you're not just, working for Talbot's Law, which is an extremely successful solicitors and conveyancer based here in Coventry, but across, well, almost the whole of England, uh,
Nearly.
nearly. But you're also a very successful portfolio landlord within your own right. And I wanted to get you on to sort of share your experience of having a foot in both camps. So before we crack on, how's your Monday been?
It's been okay. I've been firefighting through emails today, as I said before we went live. So it's been all right, not too bad. I like going out. I like being in the office sometimes. But yeah, it's been a day of emails, Chris.
And have you got much networking lined up for the rest of the week? Are you going to be back out?
I think this is a quiet week, which is okay because the first 3 months of the year has been fairly full on. So a quiet week every now and then is not too bad.
Yeah, I totally get that. I've amongst a chest infection and actually feeling quite burnt out. I had a couple of weeks off, but I'm getting that. I don't know if you get it, that little itch. You know that it's almost like
I
a
know the
craving to get back out there.
yeah, absolutely.
I've heard it gets worse when you have kids as well. So
What, you want to go out there more? Is that what you're
you
saying?
want to go out networking more when you have kids.
Yes, yeah. No comment because we're being recorded.
Yeah, you're not in the office today. Um, So, Gerard, in terms of setting the scene and giving a bit of context, I'd like to take it right back to the start of your property journey. What came first? Was it being a landlord, or was it working at within sort of the legal profession?
Well, pretty bizarrely, they almost go hand in hand, right? So I might just touch on what we touched on briefly before we came on. So I started in law in not necessarily the most conventional way, and almost within a very short time of doing that, I became a landlord, but they were linked together. So I didn't go to uni in the normal way. I am qualified, by the way, if anyone's wondering. I have subsequently been to uni, but I didn't do very well in my GCSEs. I did some legal exams at college, but didn't really get very far. So I was thinking about this over the weekend when you asked me to come on. I did a direct to vendor campaign, but for employers. So because I didn't have many qualifications, I wrote to all the solicitors firms in Coventry
Hmm.
and said, please give me a job, any job, I'll take anything. And pretty much everyone ignored me. The ones that didn't are the ones that I worked for 20 years and then are the ones that Talbot's took over. So I've always been at the same place. And what happened was they gave me a job, and I essentially had a job as a secretary, typing completion statements, right? So I worked for one of the senior partners. He was one of the biggest conveyancers in Coventry, so he's doing hundreds of transactions all the time. So worked with him. I'd already got an interest in finance, and as we were doing that, I sort of saw these people buying houses. It wasn't anything that was really on my radar. I didn't go to uni, like I said, so I didn't live in student accommodation. And I remember asking my boss one day, whatever it was, one week, why is Mr. Jones buying a house? Didn't he buy one a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, or a month ago? And he said, "Oh, they buy them and they rent them out." And I said, "Oh, right. How's that work then?" So he explained it to me, and then went off and did some solicitor thing. I thought, "Oh, that sounds quite interesting." And I think this was probably a year or 18 months into being there. So then I thought, well, maybe I should give that a go. And that's what I did. I saved up a really small amount of money then because you could get mortgages with smaller deposits. And I bought my first buy to let. So actually, it's nearly always gone hand in hand, the solicitor bit, legal bit, and the property bit since I started.
Great stuff. So Talbots have got a lot to answer for then.
Yeah, absolutely. They have.
And when you were sort of starting out, did you have a clear direction of what it is that you wanted to do with those properties or the sort of tenants that you wanted to attract? Or did you just kind of learn on the job and sort of take the experiences as they came?
I had no plan, Chris.
Right.
Is the honest answer. So other than that sounds like a good thing to do, long term, way down the line. I look back at I still got the first property I purchased, which was about 20, purchased it 22 years ago, something like that. I mean, it wasn't the best purchase. It's been a good rental, but no, I didn't have an idea what I wanted to do other than rentals seemed good. You got some. I mean, I wouldn't. It's embarrassing to look back at how much I paid for that property. I didn't. I didn't look at things like yield or anything like that. It was, oh, it work. It looks like it works. So no, I didn't have any idea other than I wanted to get some, and that was it.
Okay. And if you could start all over again now from when you first started out and you took that property on, what do you think the main lesson is that you've learned through those 22 years of building that portfolio?
Um, well, just to go back a step, the one thing I did do that was probably right was I bought near the hospital in Coventry.
Mm,
So I always had in my mind that you needed to have some form of secure tenant in some way. And in my mind, if you've got doctors or nurses that are effectively employed by the government, then it's a good secure tenant. So I did that right. What I did in the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years was buy leasehold properties. And I was quite selective about which ones I purchased. So I was never really caught by high service charge or big blocks of flats or things like that. But I never, for those properties, experienced the capital gain that I would have had with a house.
yeah.
So if I could go back, I would buy houses. That's what I would do. Having said that, those flats, once I sorted them out and did what I needed to do, have cash flowed really, really well.
Yeah.
So I haven't had the capital gain that I would have had I bought houses, but I've had the cash flow. But if I was starting again, I'd buy houses. I'd avoid flats mainly.
And what was the strategy with the flats? Were you buying them on short leases or were they just because they were a lot more, I guess they were a lot more cheaper than buying houses?
Yeah, so honestly, strategy is not something I've really thought about until I started to scale. So that the scaling really has only happened in the last 4 or 5 years. The
Right.
strategy with the flats was simply price, mate. That was it, right?
Yeah.
They were cheaper, but the irony is the difference really in the price of a flat and a house then was relatively marginal. So it was simply I can only just about afford a flat for. I think the first one was about 57,000. Even that, so this is 20 years ago. Even now, it's only worth about 85.
Hmm.
I think a house then I may have got for 65, 70. That house is probably worth 200 now. So the strategy was I didn't have much money. That strategy has definitely followed me throughout, and I still don't have much money, which is why I have to do creative stuff. But then it was they are cheaper, and that's why I bought them.
And just so we're clear, is this mainly Coventry or have you been tempted by further afield?
So it almost always is Coventry.
Yeah.
I've got, and as I have become more mature in my investing, I really, really do think Coventry is a fantastic place to invest. I have got some in Nuneaton and Bedworth and just around the outskirts. I have very randomly got a property in Rotherham as well, as
Yeah.
you do. Purchased that just after lockdown. That was a good buy, but the problem there is the rents aren't great. Well, I say the rents aren't great; they're not massive, but that property has gone up in value. If I'd scaled there and it's a house, I'm sure you could build a really good portfolio. But Coventry's good for me because I'm local. I know the agents. I've got a network around me, etc.
Well, look, I've never had someone, as I said, on from Coventry before, and I'd be really fascinated to learn from you because you would have been building your portfolio around the time that I started networking. And when I started networking, this was what, and if you've joined the webinar before, I apologize because you've heard me talk about this before, but in my experience, there was a HMO boom in
Yes.
Coventry. And that happened probably about 2014, maybe from 2010 to about 2015. And it was maybe even a bit later, actually. And what you were finding was the local PIN meeting had about 110 people turn up at it every single month. And there was people coming down from Manchester, people coming up from the southeast, because Coventry was labelled as the best place to buy a HMO. What was that like for you when you were still trying to build your portfolio and seeing all this level of competition coming in from different investors around the country?
So I think I've always been quite good at reading or seeing warning signs.
Mm,
And I do have a couple of HMOs, and it might be something we touch on later. But generally, I've always avoided it because
mm,
I think there's a concentration risk. I think that it's difficult to exit HMOs, and that is definitely what people are finding now. So that they all came to Coventry because they would buy. The only competition was you buy the two up, two down, and I was buying those, but they then turn them into these 7 bedroom houses by ripping the insides out. Absolutely nuts. Buy them for 80,000, then get, we won't name particular banks that did this, but they would then get massive loans on them, five, 600,000. It always seemed nuts to me. It still seems nuts to me. So I've always tried to go in other places where people aren't fighting for properties because why would you fight with everyone else? It just makes no sense to me. So when I started doing short leases, which was really the time when I thought I want to give property a go in a meaningful way to scale up. Um, it was just after COVID, so we had that massive dip. Then when we came out of lockdown, everyone had so much money because of bounce back loans and savings, and they started buying everything. I thought I don't want to compete with them because why would you want to do it? I'm not going to go and queue to view a house. That's insane.
mm.
But short lease properties were still being disregarded because you had to buy cash. It seemed like it was legally complex. So I was able to do 4 or 5 of those. I think it was either in 2020 or maybe 2021 in one year. And that, I think at that stage, we'd only got about 5 or 6 houses. So I almost doubled my portfolio in one year just by doing that strategy, for want of a better word. And I've always tried to go the opposite direction, not for any other reason. And I just think if a market's saturated, I don't necessarily want to be in it.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get that. We had quite a number of blocks in the north side of Nuneaton that had short leases on them. And basically, a company came in and bought the blocks and owned the freehold. And then obviously they were privately owned and they were trying to sell them, but they were on 62-year leases, so no one would buy them. And they would eventually, it was essentially a compulsory purchase where they would then buy them off the people that were living in on the leasehold, and then they would extend the leases
Yeah.
in house, and they would make. When I was looking at the profit on it, I was just like, that's insane! Like how much money you're making out of those. But to take it to your legal hat, and in terms of your legal perspective, I imagine you were seeing just an absolute flurry of cases coming through Talbot's at the time, around that similar time. Was it like a switch was turned on in terms of the amount of conveyancing work that just came?
Yeah, so at that time, that was the firm that Talbot's acquired. So it was a firm called Sargent Sons. They did so much conveyancing, it was insane. But yeah, we saw an awful lot because it was what investors were doing. So they'd buy in areas like Stoke, typically Earlsdon.
Mm.
They would buy anything that was going and they would remortgage it. So yeah, it was incredibly busy, and it was a real favourite strategy for everyone. But it did always seem a bit nuts to me because very difficult to exit, I thought. And in fact, an agent phoned me today, WhatsApp me, and said, "Would you buy this in Earlsdon, ex-student house?
Mm.
Hasn't been able to sell it. It's been on the market nearly a year." When people start WhatsApping me, it means things are pretty desperate because I don't pay full market value because that's not how the model operates. But it just goes to show they paid, I won't say the price, but they paid a price in 2009 that I wouldn't pay for it now at a discount. And it just goes to show how markets can turn when you're concentrating on a very niche thing.
Yeah, which is incredible because Earlsdon, when you think of Earlsdon, for people that don't know Coventry, it's um it's a really, really nice area of Coventry. It's almost like its own village, quite close to the city centre. And what you find is a lot of the students want to live there, but also a little bit more affluent families move into there. And it's got sort of a real sort of upmarket feel to it with the sort of independent businesses and how it is. It's actually where your property and poppadoms is in
Yeah,
Oldham.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's a
So
great area, but this particular one, just on the outskirts of Coventry, big family home used for students, but doesn't have any parking. Students now have more all moved into the blocks or they want nicer boutique HMOs. And it's just incredible that the markets can switch like that, which is why back to the early point is I've always been a massive fan of single let buy to let, always have been, right? You can always tenant them, you can always sell them, you can always get rid of them in an auction. I just think it's one of those things that's overlooked. It's not SA, it's not HMOs, it's not whatever. I don't even know what's the latest strategy, Chris. Whatever the latest strategy is.
supported living,
Yeah,
social
okay,
housing.
supported living. Yeah, although I I have done an awful lot of leasing to companies, and that is one of the big ways that I've grown my portfolio. But I've been doing it a long time, way before it's been the buzzword and things like that. But that has actually been integral to the growth. But it has always been done with single let, buy to let type properties, not adapted stuff, not C2 stuff, etc.
Well, that's really refreshing to hear because I think particularly some of the, let's call them shock jocks on social media will label buy to let as dead. You've heard it sort of put out there consistently that buy to let is dying and they're now sort of navigating their way into different strategies or even trying to try their hand at ground up development. That's clearly not your experience through all this. So is there something that there may be missing?
I I wonder myself, and sometimes you double check what you're doing and think, am I missing something? All I can say is I've done this for 20 years now. In the first 5 to 7 years, I definitely didn't have a clue what I was doing, but
Mm.
it was single lets, right? And I have missed out on some boom periods, like the student market in Coventry. When it was booming, it was really booming. But consistently throughout, nearly every one of my properties has always been tenanted. I've never had any arrears or major problems with anything. And the the single let model works because you can lease that to a housing provider, but you can lease it to an individual. Buy to let being dead is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard, right? Unless humans don't need to live in houses, how can buy to let be dead? It's just nonsensical, but it's boring, right? Buying a house, painting the walls, tenanting it. It's boring, right? It is not green velvet cushions. It is not dormer extensions. It's just boring. But it's boring because it's predictable, it's reliable, it's repeatable, and it's scalable, which is what a lot of these other strategies aren't. You can't scale them very easily,
Yeah,
in my view.
yeah, that's true. there's something very sustainable about that as a business model in terms of, and you know that there is constant demand there. Whereas when you start switching it up to HMOs and you see what happened in Coventry, yeah, it can be quite difficult. And a lot of those HMO landlords are not in the industry anymore on the back of that boom. So yeah, dead interesting. So, in terms of your career at Talbot's and what you're currently doing now, can you share a little bit about what your sort of roles and responsibilities now in terms of Talbot's? So you started off effectively as secretary, and well, that was your word. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely, no, absolutely factual. So, what I essentially did was I started off working for a conveyancer, did that for a few years, then thought, right, what I'd like to do my own cases. Um, as that progressed, I thought, well, I do want to get qualified. Actually, I quite like this career. I'd like to do it. So, um, the company I was working for said, which was succeeded by Talbot's. I said, could you put me through exams at uni? So they did. I studied in the evening, still worked full time, um, got qualified eventually. So I did conveyancing initially, which is where a lot of my property knowledge came from. Then I did wills and probate, which was quite interesting because it had quite a lot of tax stuff in it. So it meant I can navigate tax rules quite efficiently. And then latterly, I did litigation. So I did a lot of landlord and tenant work, an awful lot of landlord and tenant work, other types of litigation. And then around 2020, I was thinking, not sure if I want to do this in this way for the next 20 years. Um, and sort of thought maybe I'll give property a go full time. And then Talbot's purchased the company that I worked for. And I'd said to them, look, I don't really want to do the day to day lawyer stuff anymore. And they said, not a problem because we're such a large business. How would you like to work in sales and work in business development? You know, we've got a role there. Give it a go. See what you think. Did it. Absolutely flipping love it. So my day to day role now is seeing you at events, talking to business clients, talking to high net worth individuals, spreading the word about Talbots, but also having detailed meetings with some clients and talking to them about how they might want to structure certain things from a business perspective, from a property perspective. So it's a fantastic role where I get to use the skills that I've acquired over the years, but I don't have to do the stuff that I perhaps don't like so much, which is the day to day technical paperwork stuff.
Yeah, and I remember as an agent when because we used to do our own sales chasing, and it was a case of that when the memorandums of sale would come in, and you would know who's selected what solicitors. If Sargentons was on the list, you were like a bit of a sigh of relief, and then you'd look
Yeah,
to see what the buyer solicitors were or what the vendor solicitors were. And that made such a difference to how the transaction would go
of
through
course.
based on
Absolutely. Yeah.
and the solicitors are all based on the same street, or it's a row of what they look like houses, beautiful
Yeah.
whitewash buildings, and there's a whole row of solicitors on there, and I won't name any names, but there's at least one or two on that row that you wouldn't want the case to go to. But thankfully, if Sargentons was on it or Talbot's, you kind of felt safe in the knowledge that at least
It'd get done.
it get done. Yeah, it stood a good chance of you getting your
Yeah.
commission at the end of the
Yeah.
completion point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to love that for years. I had a real sense of pride. The people I worked with were really good at what they did, and I got so much technical knowledge. That's where I really learned a great deal because it was a high street firm. Yes, you deal with a lot of conveyancing, but then you'd have the fallout from all of that. You'd have divorces, you'd have litigation, um, and you'd get people walking in with crazy questions that you'd have to try and at least give an answer to or say I'd come back to you. So I learned a massive amount doing it, even though it was a relatively small high street firm. I learned a great deal. And it was great, that whole conveyancing, trying to get things through on a Friday. It was really good. And all the experience since then has been great. But like I say, around 2020, I thought of try and do property, but then Talbots came in, and since then, as I say, it's always gone hand in hand, Chris. Bizarrely, always gone hand in hand.
I love that. And since 2020, there has been a non-stop news cycle of things happening in property, and particularly from the legal side. You like that segue there? There we go.
Yes.
Um, Jonathan Ross, watch out. In terms of the stuff that we've seen stamp duty reform, we've seen the renters reform bill come in, we've seen sort of different changes to EPCs. How is it? What is it like when you're sat in the office and you're seeing either the budget or you're seeing a white paper being floated about on, and it comes up on BBC News? How do you prepare for that?
Well, that's quite interesting because I can answer that with two different hats on. So,
Yeah, yeah,
as a conveyancer, right? They used to. Well, you will know how it because you must have thought, oh, this is going to knock sales massively. So, whenever they used to do stamp duty stuff, right? And they'd announce it. They'd either announce it way too far in advance so the market goes massively one way, or
yeah,
they'll announce it that it's imminent to be implemented in the next 20 seconds
yeah.
and the market goes the other way. So, from a legal point of view, it's actually really problematic because the government will do this. They'll put it on your desk via whatever they release online, and you need to become a master of all this detailed information that they've just thrown out there and deal with all the phone calls because of course everyone then says I've got to get it through, I've got to get it through. So it's a difficult situation, and actually I think conveyancing has become more tough, which is why a lot of landlords get frustrated with how long it now takes to buy a house. It's actually longer now than it was pre-COVID. It makes no sense. There are reasons for it, and there's ways you can get around it, but it's not it's not a great process. That's down to lending rules and just the legal system in the country. But then, if you if I put my landlord hat on, I've grown my portfolio. It's 10 times the size that it was at 2020, right? So I've massively grown my portfolio through this very volatile period of 5 years. And all I ever try and tell my brain, because it does affect you, is it's just all white noise. So it goes back to the fundamentals of, do people need to live in houses? Yes, they do. Does everyone want to buy a house, or can they afford to? No. So therefore the fundamentals are right. The rest of it is noise. Just
Mm.
it's just constant noise being thrown at you. You have to deal with it, and we'll come on to the Renters' Rights Act. You have to deal with it, but it's just noise. It doesn't change the underlying fundamentals too much. Like stamp duty does a bit for landlords, Renters' Rights Act, and the fines. Yeah, it does change the fundamentals a bit, but not what the actual need is, and there is a need there.
Well, there's two things that I can say that you definitely notice the change in. That's one, the amount of phone calls that the conveyancer will get in the run up to a change of stamp duty
Yeah,
to see how quickly they can get it through. And the second one is the amount of time that the searches take,
yeah,
which is one of the most quantifiable measures that I can see in the last few years. That going back a few years ago, it used to take 2 weeks for the searches to come back, and then it would take a couple of weeks for inquiries to be made and the inquiries to be reviewed. And that was a standard metric that most agents, conveyancers, and we could convey that to vendors and buyers
yeah,
quite easily. If there was an issue with the sale, it was a complicated purchase, you knew that those reviews, those inquiries were going to take a little bit longer to review. And if there's something hiding away in a sort of lease management pack, then that's where you can sort of manage expectations quite well. But the thing that I've noticed, and speaking to a lot of people purchasing properties at the moment, is that that search time has gone up from 4 weeks to from 2 weeks up to 4 to 6 weeks. And I think from having my estate agent's hat on, it's quite quick that the estate agents will blame the conveyancer, But they don't really know that until post-event, that it's actually the local authorities are taking so much longer to produce that information. So the conveyancer gets a lot of flack for it when they
Yeah.
really don't deserve it. And I've spoken to a number of contacts at the land registry, and they're trying to digitize the process so that you can go on and you can get your searches and pay £15, just like you're downloading the TR1
Yeah.
document. But the problem is that a true reflection of the problem is that the local authorities, only two-thirds of them are signed up to it because only two-thirds of them actually know where their search documents are,
Yeah.
and are able to digitize them. So it kind of puts conveyancers and solicitors more broadly in such a difficult position during what is arguably one of the toughest times in property at the moment. Is that what you like your experience? Obviously, I've
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. No, that is absolutely the case. And there's also all these other factors, like the land registry being massively behind on registration, the compliance stuff, the the AML stuff, the know your client stuff. So even though in theory, because the technology is better than it was pre-COVID, things should be moving faster, they're not. They're moving more slowly. And being a conveyancer is pretty tough, actually, because we as people now used to ordering off Amazon and everything else do expect things to be available digitally straight away, and they're just not, and that is a problem. So the industry needs fixing. That is another three webinars on its own. But it's again, there's ways if you're talking about growing portfolios. Nearly I've always exclusively nearly always bought at auction, post auction, pre auction, so everything's already there. Extensively use bridging finance, make sure that the houses aren't occupied, they're vacant, because all these things massively slow transaction times down. But yeah, it's pretty frustrating, the conveyancing industry, I think.
Yeah, and the biggest lie, it's not a myth, the biggest lie that needs to be dispelled on this webinar is the fact that it's not called DX anymore. It's owned by a different company. But DX is supposed to be an overnight postal service. So when the solicitor tells you that they've sent it off in the DX, you as an agent or you as someone purchasing a property will expect it to be with your solicitor by first thing the next day. It's not true. It doesn't take less than 12 hours to get a document shipped to someone. If I'd have known that, I'd probably still be friends with a lot of conveyancers now.
I'm not sure the DX system even exists anymore. I
It's
don't know. I don't know whether it's still a thing.
Isn't it something else? It's called
Might,
something else now.
it may be. So it wasn't. It was a different system for postage for solicitors, and probably other professionals. I don't know. I used to have to take the DX post,
Yeah,
so it's separate post, right, round the corner from the office, put it in the DX box so that they could collect it and get it. Yeah, I mean, all of that's changed, but then why does everything take so long now?
I know, I know. I still see DX have still got lorries that drive around down the M6, and I always like, I want to go past them.
You've
Um,
ruined my life.
yeah, yeah. Think of all the conveyancers I'd still be friends with. So I called it the Renters Reform Bill, but you
Yeah,
said it was the Renters' Rights Act.
yeah.
What's the correct
Oh
terminology?
gosh, Chris. If only we had the Renters Reform Bill. The Renters Rights Act is the Renters Reform Bill on speed.
Right.
So, so the Renters Reform Bill was the proposed bill from the Conservatives.
Yeah.
The Renters Rights Act is the act that has been passed and was put forward by Labour. As I said to you at the start, I'm not going to profess to be an expert in the details and the intricacies of the Act itself. I do know how it affects me and my lettings business, because it does affect it quite substantially. But the clue is in the name. So we had the reform, which was a lot of the things that was in the reform bill are in the Renters' Rights Act, but the Renters' Rights Act is about tenants' rights, and it's about moving rights away from landlords over to tenants. And in many ways, undoes the past 30 years of lettings legislation.
Right.
So, Section 21, which most people will be familiar with, was a non fault ground for possession. And without being too technical, it simply meant that if you, as a landlord, wanted your tenants out, you didn't need to give a reason. You issued a piece of paper that said, there is a notice. The notice period is whatever I need to give you in the act. And at the end of that notice period, you must leave. If you don't leave, the courts will make you leave. Very, very broadly. However, the Renters' Rights Act really is about saying to landlords, you can't get your tenant out without a good reason. We don't really want hobbyist landlords. We don't want accidental landlords. We want landlords doing this as a business. And if you're a business, your tenants are your clients, they're your customers. You can't just get them out on a couple of months' notice. That's not happening. So they are different pieces of legislation. Or one was proposed legislation, massively a massive transfer of rights to tenants, basically.
And you'll be in a better position than most because you'll have seen changes like this come in at various points through your 22-year career as a landlord and both working for Talbots. How soon did you start preparing for this as a landlord yourself?
Very good question. I think I said to you that a lot of my properties are leased to housing providers.
Mm.
And the narrative around landlord and tenant law has been changing for a while. So I made a conscious decision to try and lease my properties on commercial leases and move away from ASTs. So I've been doing that anyway as time went on. I'm doing it more now because the Renters' Rights Act is quite draconian. It's not the end of the world. If you're a compliant landlord, you do things properly, you'll be okay. But there are more things to trip you up, many more things to trip you up. So compliance is one of the things I've been focusing on, making sure that we've got really rigid systems for gas safety checks, EICRs, things like that. And then making sure that the tenants that are going in when they're private tenants are really gold-plated tenants, making sure that rent guarantee insurance is available for those tenants because I'm taking a risk. I want to ensure that I've also offset that risk by using rent guarantee insurance, something like that, and leasing to housing providers. So 70% of my portfolio is now leased.
Right. And in terms of the sort of experiences that you've had at Talbots, I guess it's a bit like that HMO boom. You must have had the moment there started to be a sniff of this coming in, then the floodgate must have opened from.
Well, it did, but what happens with most things in property, definitely, people leave it quite late. So
Right.
we are being instructed now to do Section 21s. Really, this has been on the horizon for a long time. And I've spoken at events saying, look, if you've got some troublesome tenants, sort that tenancy out now. However, we are now very, very busy and we've only got a few months left before we won't be able to do Section 21s.
Right. So are people going to get to the point where they're panicking, do you think?
I think I think they're panicking now.
Yeah.
And the media doesn't help. The media says it's all over, like you indicated, the social media stuff, which is why you've got UK Homes Network, right? Because social media is just lots of different people saying lots of different things. It's not actually the granular knowledge people need. So yes, they are panicking because they just see a post on Facebook saying it's all over. So there is panic. Some of the properties I've picked up from people are retiring landlords that are they're almost, I'm going to give my property away. I'm going to take a haircut on the price I'm willing to accept because I'm so fearful about what's about to happen. So it's completely disproportionate. You know, they might say, I will sell my property for exactly the same price as I bought it for 10 years ago because they somehow think this is the end of buy to let. It's not. But yes, people are panicking. 100% they are.
Yeah, we talked about this off camera. It's kind of alienating those people that came through in the 80s and 90s that were sold the dream of passive income and didn't really have to do much with the properties, just had to find the tenant and then maybe chuck the keys at a letting agent and hope for the best that the tenant pays their rent. And I guess if you've had a property on your books for the last 30 years that you've not really had to do a lot to, there's going to be a good chance that under the Renters' Rights Act, you're going to need to bring it up to a certain standard in order to ensure that it is compliant with the law. Would you say that probably other than the no fault evictions, it's the AWAB's law that's going to catch the most people out?
I think that's one of them, definitely, but not necessarily the main thing. The main thing, and the main thing I'm worried about, is the fining regime. So,
Right.
for example, if you, well, the government released the statement that you have to give to tenants last week, I think it was.
Mm.
I think the date is you've got to do that by the 31st of May, maybe the 1st of May, but the date's on there. When you go on the website, got all the bump and the blurb on there, and in bold, it says, if you do not do this, you may face a fine of £7,000. £7,000 for failing to deliver a piece of paper to a tenant is quite draconian, I think. That doesn't seem proportionate at all. But that's the Parliament's passed the act. That's what it is. So it's not necessarily Arabs, although that's part of it. It's all the fines that can be levied on a landlord, and that's one of very many. So similar fines if you are late with a gas safety certificate. So not miss it. You're not a bad landlord. You have just missed it by a few days. You may be fined. So it's the fines, I think, that are really worrying people. But largely, most of the landlords that are exiting, they don't look at this granular detail. They just see the headlines and have thought, I've had enough. I don't want to deal with this. And what I would say, though, as well, is also a lot of these landlords have just reached natural retirement age. So, like you said, they started in the late 80s, early to mid 90s. That's over 30 years ago.
Mm.
They're just in their 60s and they want out. So whilst the legislation might be a bit of a driver, it's not necessarily the main driver. All of this you can cope with. All of it with robust systems will be absolutely fine. And the thing with amateur landlords leaving the sector and all this legislation, it means that moats are being built around our businesses. So it's much harder for someone that's starting out that can only buy one or two to get into the sector. So providing I run my lettings business compliantly and well, I should have my pick of tenants. So it's a good thing from a business perspective, providing you understand all the issues.
Yeah, it is optimistic, and I do like that. It's a case of that I would also say that it's a natural conclusion to things anyway, because this was always part of that cohort of landlord strategy anyway, to release that capital at some stage so they could retire. So it's naturally coming at the point anyway when those portfolios are going to that they're going to sell off those
Absolutely.
portfolios.
You have, and that's that one of the big things about you asked me at the start what was the plan. I didn't have one then. I absolutely have one now. And exiting has to be part of your plan. Hey, because it's going to happen anyway. You're going to sell or you're going to die. You are exiting,
Yeah,
right? That's it. And this is part of a natural exit to a certain extent. So it's not, some of it's forced, some of it's natural.
yeah, totally agree. I'm aware of time, and we're running out rapidly of time, so I'm gonna take it to a couple of questions.
That's fine. I've got probably an extra 5 minutes to run on if need be. So a couple of questions.
Okay, awesome. But the first one I want to get to, because Cam Gaddery's been waiting so patiently. He's put up the Sky Blues. I'm also from Cov. So are you going to be, my final question to you, Gerard, are you going to be uncontactable in about 5 weeks' time once Cov have played their fourth game?
I'm not a football follower, so I I am always contactable, Chris.
Yeah, that's the right answer. There you go. Yeah, fair enough. As a Villa fan, I'm going to board up all my windows and hide in about 4 to 5 weeks' time because this city is going to be mental. So yeah, can't wait for that one. Um, so, Patricia put this is really interesting and enjoyable. Mark confirmed for us DX delivery absolutely exists in the UK and it's quite commonly used for business and legal posts. So it's still about. But I think there are a lot of solicitors that have transitioned away from it. That's certainly the evidence that I've heard. Cam has asked, who are the gold-plated tenants? What checks would you do?
So I mean, I'm quite fussy about checks when I'm doing it myself, or we've got the VAs doing it. Um, we ask for 6 months bank statements, not three. Um, they need to be in the type of employment that I think would be sustainable. So ideally, we've got a HMO in Coventry, and we only let to doctors. I was going to say something then. Can I touch some wood? We've never ever had any problems to the extent I don't take deposits from them because they're professionals. If they don't pay the rent, there'd be in trouble with their professional regulatory body. So I look for professionals if I can. It's no guarantee, but never had any problems with them. Or someone working in a good job, or alternatively, a very steady job, like in an Aldi warehouse or something like that. Those are the ones that I tend to find are very good. And when I say gold plated, what I also mean is they are eligible for or rent guarantee insurance. So I'm not prepared to take risks unless an insurance company is going to take a risk. An insurance company will only take a risk if they think that it's unlikely, based on their modelling, that that tenant wouldn't pay the rent. And that's how I assess things, right? So, although I've never had any real problems, I have had to claim on a rent guarantee insurance policy once. It did pay out. That's fine, right? It's about longevity over the long term for me. So gold plated is professional job or job they've been in for years and years, seem fairly stable, and rent guarantee insurance available.
Yeah, and uh, in terms of your strategy with the way that you placed your properties, you said that you found them quite close to a hospital. So I imagine that's the Walsgrave. That
Yeah,
that kind of naturally supports your strategy for finding those tenants. If you know that they're going to be located in and
yeah,
around the hospital, that makes it a lot easier to try and get those gold-plated tenants on board.
yeah, absolutely. There is a slight nuance around that though, because I've heard of people buying. So JLR is a massive employer in Coventry, right? Now, I would say actually it's a bit of a risky strategy if you pin something around a private employer
Yeah.
because that employer can go out of business. Whereas my thinking is hospitals don't go out of business generally. They might be underfunded, but generally speaking, they are backed by the government, right? So there's definitely a strategy there. What I also do is when I work with certain providers, I know what properties they want. So I have a lot of one beds in the portfolio. The care leaver companies that I lease to, they want around the city centre or within a certain distance of the city centre. So I'll buy within that distance. So I am quite strategic about where I buy because I need those properties filled.
Yeah.
That's it, right? I'm not going to buy even let's say a HMO in Coventry City Centre. It's super cheap. I'm not going to buy it currently because there aren't many tenants for it. I might be able to get a housing provider in there, but I'm unlikely to get students in there. So I try to be strategic about where I buy things.
Yeah, great. So almost totally gearing it towards the public sector because with Jaguar Land Rover is a perfect example that it probably gets more flack in the media than property professionals with, cyber attacks and the rate that it's, up and down in the market, price of steel, all that sort of stuff. So that's going to have a knock-on effect on your business. If you're where you're located, for example, if you're in Cheltenham, GCHQ is up the road, or there might be a big MOD base, or there might be a big private hospital.
Absolutely. I think that sort of strategic planning is key. And it's the same, the housing providers, social housing is a buzz thing at the moment. But if you find out how they're funded, and if they are genuinely funded by the government through contracts, they're on frameworks, etc., it's sort of the same, and therefore you've got some consistency with your funding. So I'm a big fan of being strategic, trying to align yourself with some form of government backing, because it just makes life a lot easier. You can't always do it, but again, in the era of the Renters' Rights Act, that's number one. And then I would say go out to the private market.
Great stuff. And before we go to our final question from Kate, I'm just going to give you the opportunity to give you a quick plug. Um, but you are a serious networker, Gerard. You're up and down the country. We've got two events hosts actually in the audience tonight of events that you've either spoken at or that you partnered up with. So we've got Mark Burrows from Midlands Investor Network Group, lovingly named as Ming, and we've also got Mark McAleenan from Northampton Property Meet. So I just wanted to give those guys a shout out because you've obviously been working quite hard with those events. But other than UK Homes Network, because you've got a profile in the platform, so if anyone wants to drop you a message after, they certainly can. Where can people find you when you're not networking?
I'm always networking, Chris. Online, offline, always. I'm on LinkedIn quite prolifically, so they can find me there. I do a weekly buy-to-let newsletter on LinkedIn, so people can subscribe to that. It's all my ramblings about things that I think are going on in the sector. Talbot's Law email is on the Talbot's Law website. They can get me there. I'm in goodness knows how many property WhatsApp groups. I do a very small amount of property training. Almost don't like talking about it because it's got such a bad rep in the sector. But I do a bit of training. We're doing 4 this year. We've done 2 already with a friend of mine called Raj Sharma. And that is on some of the things we've talked about tonight, which is very detailed, very focused ways to grow a property portfolio without any of the smoke and mirrors, none of the nonsense, none of this buy a house for £1. Yes, you can. I know how to do it. It's pretty difficult. It's not scalable. So you can come along to one of those. And I host Property and Poppadoms in Coventry.
You certainly do, and I've been along to it, and I absolutely love it. So if you fancy a curry and you want some good contacts to have, then Property and Poppadoms in Coventry is the one. But yeah, in terms of you and Raj, you both got fantastic reputations within the industry, and if you are starting out and you want some honest, straightforward advice, I seriously recommend you look up Raj Sharma and also Gerard because they will look after you. They come from a really, really good place, and I know that there is a lot of sort of negative press around property mentors, but it's all the feedback that's coming out of what those guys are doing at the minute has been absolutely fantastic. So please do check them out. We'll go to You're very welcome, mate. We'll go to our 2 final questions. So Kate has asked, and the notice has to be served to tenants by end of May or whatever. That is only for AST tenants and not for lease properties, i.e. to social housing.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's one of the reasons that I lease most of my properties because it's not a lot of the legislation doesn't affect leased properties.
Great. And a question, you'll love this one from Kate. are you accepting clients for solicitor services?
Absolutely, yeah, always, always. So always very happy to answer questions. Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Talbots have actually helped me out a couple of times in the past, and have gone to them and just for an initial conversation, the amount of value and advice that Gerard's given me is invaluable. So, Kate, please do make sure you reach out to Gerard after this webinar. So, when is your next meeting with Raj?
So that is the 15th of May.
Brilliant. So, 15th of May, put that in your diary. Is there anything else you want to shout out before we conclude tonight?
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I've enjoyed it. I don't usually get to talk about the history part, so that's quite good. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome, mate. It's been long overdue, and I'm very proud to have you on this evening. It's been brilliant. So, yeah, thank you guys for giving up your Monday night. The sun has gone down, and you cannot worry about missing any of the sunshine. We'll be back next week with another webinar. But if you want to stay in touch with some of the people that you've been talking to in the chat, or if you want to reach out to Gerard or myself, then please do download the UK Homes Network app. It's totally free, and we'd love to see you in there. Hopefully, we'll see you in Manchester at the end of the month, and make sure you do get that 30% discount code off your tickets. Have a great evening, guys, and we'll catch you very soon.
Cheers.